uh, diligence by the folks that spend the money for our parish, being careful. So we ended up doing about $36,000, as I said, better than budget. That made our shortfall, or our total operating deficit, a little bit more than $9,000. And again, under the circumstances, I think that's an excellent result. I do want to point out that in the 2 years prior to this, we had about a $72,000 surplus in terms of results versus budget. So it's not completely unusual for our church to have some swings back and forth. Turning now to 2022, you will see that our pledge and non-pledge revenue, that really important foundation of the results, is largely flat, up about $4,000. We think, given the ongoing uncertainty and the fact that some of our community has moved away or remains in uncertain times, that it made sense to be conservative there. We certainly hope that that is a number that we can beat. Other income is up fairly substantially for two reasons. First, our endowment, which Betty is going to speak to after me, continues to grow, and every year we do take a draw from the endowment that helps our revenue. We also have some funds that are budgeted to come in from a new program, which also will be addressed to help with associate rector housing. So on the whole, our total revenue is budgeted at $1,045,781. On the expense side, our expense budget is up fairly significantly. Big picture, that's because the vestry talked about it, and we really think it's important that as we look to reopen and continue to build the strength of our community, that we make sure that we are delivering the programming and the experience that everyone expects, and will allow us to attract new members and deliver a great experience. Some of the specific reasons that the expense budget is up: we will be searching for an associate rector this year, and that will have some additional one-time expenses associated with it. At the direction of the diocese, we have transitioned some of our former contract workers to employees, and that transition comes with some higher expenses. And then in general, it's worth noting that we do live in an inflationary world, and we should expect that our expenses each year will continue to grow, which is once again why it's so important that we also continue to think about growing our revenue, especially on the donation front. The bottom line is that this results in a budgeted deficit of just over $86,000. That's certainly a significant number. I will say it's not unheard of. And for example, in 2017, our budgeted deficit was more than $100,000, and in 2018, it was approximately $77,000. So levels like this, although they wouldn't be sustainable over a long period, there are times in the church's history where they occur and they make sense. I would, for me, and speaking for myself, and I think for the vestry, part of the reason that we were comfortable with this budgeted deficit rather than cutting expenses even more is because of the surplus of the prior years and the strong other funds that our community has in the form of our endowment, which Betty is going to talk about in a moment. Before I open it up for questions, I would be remiss if I didn't mention how valuable and important Betty's work has been this year, and also echoing Jim Fisher, Ellen's work. Without Betty and Ellen, none of these numbers would be here, so thank you so much. Any questions before I ask Betty to come up? Yes?
Yeah, I have a question about the whether our pledges come in, whether pledges will come in over the course of the year to help us meet the budgeted goal. And I know that I understand there's fluctuation, but is there a sort of a general sense of, okay, we usually hit about 80, 90, 95%, and then the rest trickles in?
Well, as I just said, the real brain trust is sitting in the audience here in that regard, but my understanding and experience is each year, I think that the pledge revenue, how it generally works is, is pretty predictable. I think the pandemic has thrown a monkey wrench in things and some folks have moved away, but yes, there is a flow to the year. Yes. Yeah, I think what I would say maybe to echo that, as we all think as a community what we want to do to continue to stay strong and build strength, it's probably stating the obvious. I think the current community is extremely generous and has continued to be that way. Really, it's about growing the community, bringing new folks in as our world starts opening up again, and back to the expense numbers. That's why the vestry said, okay, this is probably a year where we're going to be comfortable spending a little more than the budgeted revenue with the long term in mind. Any other questions? Yes.
Regarding the diagnosis and assessment, can I ask you, is that a formula every year or is it scheduled to increase generally? How was that assessed?
It is. I think it is a formula, but I'm not exactly sure of the math, Betty. Or
Let me take
yeah,
a shot on
yeah.
the mic. You can yell at me if I get this wrong.
That is a mandatory 17% of our what we spent, what we actually spent 2 years prior. So it is that right, Betty? So that, yeah, it is required for us as a member of the diocese and a member of the Episcopal Church, and it is based on what you actually spent 2 years before, not what you took in.
And I think, David, is it fair to say that our parish our assessment is pretty large?
Well, given our budget, it's either the largest or one of the top three.
So certainly when we think about donating, of course we're helping our community, but it does go back to the broader Episcopal community around here, which is also worth thinking about. Of course. Yes?
Has there been any real record keeping of who's left, why they've left, if they've actually stopped pledging, or what's happened to them, or if they're planning to come back? Is there any real tabulation or record? I mean, you mentioned people have moved away. Does that mean we just aren't getting pledges from them anymore?
Ellen, Betty, any? Yeah, or Jim.
Let me say, and
Yeah,
Ellen,
Jim.
If you're going to continue to answer, you should come up here because our people at home have to have this
Fair
microphone.
enough. Sorry about
So
that.
if anyone's, so actually, questions are supposed to be later in this. So, but let's take it now. But Ellen, if you could come up here, if there's a technical answer, we'll need you on the mic. But let me take this from a theological perspective initially. We're still in the middle of the transition, and so it's hard to see what the landscape will look like. Traditionally, when people move out of the area, they connect to a church elsewhere and they pledge there, which I highly encourage. Sometimes people have a connection still and they continue to give here. And the landscape across all churches has drastically shifted in the last 18 months. And so actually, I appreciate the question, because at some point, to use the language, when this is not pandemic and becomes endemic, we should ask those questions from a larger perspective. That's a great one, but right now, things are still in a lot of flux.
Okay.
Okay, maybe then I'll cut it off, or please hold your questions until the right time. Okay, and now I would like to call, here we go.
I'm taking control, I apologize. I'd really like to hear from Ruth Tatum, who oversees our scholarships fund, and she has to leave at noon, so rector's prerogative. But first of all, for that, I can't thank John Adair enough for this great work, so thank you, John. And forgive me, Betty, I'm going to adjust so Ruth can talk about this great ministry opportunity we have that she oversees with us currently.
Good morning or afternoon, I'm not quite sure yet. I'm a member of the committee that manages the St. Mary Magdalene Scholarship, along with Sandy Stadfeld and Ron Clark, and of course our finance committee. And the St. Mary Magdalene Scholarship Fund was created by a generous bequest from an anonymous longtime parishioner of St. Mary's. And this funds undergraduate scholarships for women of our parish seeking college education. And last year, $44,000 was awarded to 12 undergraduate women for the 2021-22 academic year. And all of these women have been involved in our parish in various ways in the past. Many acolytes, youth group members, in the children's choir, and I have to say that it's a pleasure to read their applications. They're really some outstanding women. So here below on page 9 is a list of the women receiving the scholarships and the impressive list of schools that they're attending. And seems like we almost always have 12 young women, and the money is pretty much the same most years. So I look forward to another good year. It looks like we'll have just about the same number for next year. So.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate your shepherding of that ministry. Betty, please come up. Your turn, right? Yes, Betty Hood Gibson, our beloved treasurer, will tell us about legacy and endowment.
Thank you, David. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be your treasurer. And I'm also a member of the Finance Committee and the Legacy and Endowment Board. And on behalf of the Finance Committee and Legacy and Endowment Board, I want to thank John for his outstanding leadership as our finance chair this past year. So specifically today, I'm going to talk to you about the Legacy and Endowment program here at St. Mary's and the status of the endowments. It was an exciting year last year. In 2021, St. Mary had 3 separate endowment accounts. The old, long-standing St. Mary the Virgin account, the St. Mary Magdalene Scholarship program you just heard about, and a third account, the Frank Maynard Bequest, which I mentioned to you all last year. And thanks to the Frank Maynard Bequest, 2 things happened. The vestry established the Maynard Associate Rector Housing Fund with part of the bequest funds and transferred the balance of the bequest funds to the St. Mary the Virgin account. And as of December 31st this past year, the total of these 3 endowment accounts was $6,650,000. And that's a big number. And the largest is the St. Mary the Virgin account, which had $3,778,000. The Maynard, the new Maynard Associate Rector Housing account totaled $1,555,000, and the St. Mary Magdalene Scholarship Fund was $1,317,000. And Father David will explain in more detail in a few minutes about the Maynard Associate Rector Housing Fund and the discernment process that the vestry went through while they were setting up this very important new fund. In 2021, the St. Mary Virgin account had received a planned gift of $10,000 to the Colleen Skewes-Cox Memorial Fund given by Peter Skewes-Cox. We also received a bequest from the Peter Musto estate for $100,000. And then almost $1 million was added to the account when the balance of the Frank Maynard bequest was transferred after setting up the Associate Rector Housing Fund. The St. Mary the Virgin account is comprised of various endowment sub-accounts which are designated for specific purposes. And then when the need arises, we use some of those funds from the related endowment sub-accounts. In 2021, we used some of those funds out of the Parishioners in Need sub-account and some out of the Capital Reserve sub-account for improvements to the church property. We also made, as John mentioned, our annual investment transfer to the budget for operations of the church. And this past year, that was $100,359. If you look at page 12 in the annual report, you'll see in that income pie chart that that's specifically set out. So how have our investment accounts performed? Even though there was some choppy periods during the year, 2021 was a year of growth in the stock market, and that was good news. So St. Mary's ended with an excellent overall performance for the year of 13.4%. Looking out longer term, the 3-year performance was 13.5%, and both the 5-year and 10-year performances were 9%. So very good performance reports. All 3 of St. Mary's endowment accounts are invested in the same way. They have a target allocation of 70% equity and 30% a combination of fixed income and cash. And as set by our investment guidelines, our endowments are invested in various index mutual funds and exchange-traded mutual funds and not in individual stocks. Investing in this way increases our diversity and reduces our risk. How does St. Mary invest? Through the Episcopal Church Foundation, which in turn uses State Street Global Advisors, the largest asset manager with $4.14 trillion under management with more than 2,400 clients. So as you can see, with these investment partners, we're in very good hands, and investing this way keeps our costs very low. Now, David, do you want to talk about the new program?
Thank you.
And Betty, thank you again for, yeah. Not a vestry meeting goes by where we don't thank glorious God above and here for both Betty and Ellen. So thank you again. So a quick recap, because it's important for us to know about Frank Maynard's. Frank Maynard died unexpectedly a couple years ago, if you all remember, and Frank abundantly left us his home to bless us and bless this community of grace for generations to come, and it will indeed be just that. So lots of discernment led to first a decision to sell the house, and then further discernment to how to best implement it. For one of the key issues of our common existence here is, how do you afford to live here? And so to that end, and if you want the specifics of the technicalities of all this, you can talk to me afterwards. But what we are doing is basically we've set aside a designated amount of this money by the vestry, so it's not restricted in terms of legal law, it is designated by vestry, and another future time, if it's unneeded in this regard, could be used differently. But for the foreseeable future, we've set aside enough money to subsidize, if you will, rather than buying another physical property, the associate $400. And just to put that in perspective, associate clergy minimum is $86,000. So, you know, in order to get someone to live here, you got to pay them half of what you're going to pay them in a minimum salary. And so this has been communicated in our associate search process. And we currently have 5 applicants, which I'm excited to see. That's more applicants than any associate search has received in the last 4 years in this diocese. Live among us and will receive at least a minimum salary, of which you all know it takes more than the minimum to live in this city. So I'm grateful for the vestry. I'm grateful for Frank to make this possible. So I lift that up, that all of us, and I'll give my legacy giving pitch here, no matter what we have, in God's will then as well. So that's my legacy pitch. At this point, I will open up to questions about all of finances. And I do want to give John Adair a brief apology. I actually think the questions right after your presentations is the smart way to go. So forgive my control issues. I apologize. But if there are more questions about the overarch of our stewardship and finances, now is the time to offer them, because this is the last moment for questions. So do we have any questions from the community gathered? David Cross and I saw first, and if a technical person needs to answer, I'm going to invite you to the mic.
Can someone confirm for me, I think that the Episcopal Endowment Investment has some guidelines on responsible investing, so they are investing in extractive industries and companies that use.
I got you. Let me repeat for the congregation at home. The question was, what is the policy practice experience in terms of responsible investing through the Episcopal Church? Now, I will thankfully tell you that St. Mary's, the Legacy Endowment Committee, has been asking this question from State Street Episcopal Church Foundation for the last year and a half, and we are deeply in the conversation. And unfortunately, or not unfortunately, I would say fortunately, that the conversation has begun at the Episcopal Church Foundation and the State Street level, and I think there's only like 3 or 4 either dioceses or churches that are currently engaging it. So the data is there, the options are there, and we are wanting, and we are encouraging them to speed up that work so that we can engage in that area when it's probably appropriate for a church and an endowment our size to do so. So that conversation is active and ongoing. Yes.
You mentioned that the expenses projected for this coming year have been increased, and what is involved with that? I'm wondering if part of the expenses are to expand our social media or video streaming capabilities to reach other people, if that's part of the consideration.
Yeah. I'd love that. The honest truth is that the bulk of the increase is due to Yes. Yeah. So salaries, and what do you mean by benefits? Oh, like insurance, medical. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like someone's over my shoulder with a comment.
Yeah, other increases relate to having the church open all year. So the janitorial service is going to probably more than double, maybe even more, because we cut them way back when we weren't in the church. So last year we weren't in the church for quite a year, and this year hopefully we'll be in the church for 2 or 3 services, and then there's other expenses, more gardening and so forth. So all of that adds to the extra expenses this year versus last year.
And I'll also add that, St. Mary's has had an $800,000 pledge goal since the early 2000s. And so you think about the dollar power in that time. Like, we have done so much more, if you will, and faithfully, with really less. And while I will second what was said earlier about new pledges need to come in, it's also a pledge in a few years. Think about that. Why not? And maybe prayerfully say, could I? It's a spiritual practice. And so it's a message we'll continue to talk about in the long term. So what I'll say is, thankfully, because several people did give more, our average pledge did up significantly. And just to give you a sort of sense, that's been the trend across the country, is that people have, churches have lost attendance, but those who are here are even more generous and faithful. So, other questions? Yes?
David, the new vestry people coming on are terrific. Could you introduce once again the 4 people that are rotating off? I think probably of our history, they've been through one of the most tumultuous times that you can imagine over the last 3 years of their term. So,
Yes. These are our faithful retiring vestry in a season that was incredibly wild and still is. And the 4th person, not Cynthia Harper, that too keeps coming to mind. Sheila Santangelo just stepped away from vestry leadership earlier this year, and because of the timing, we decided not to fill that vacancy for, it was about 4 months. So, but we thank you, Sheila, if you're out there, for your service as well. All right, with that, I apologize for hogging the mic. I shouldn't have done it. I'm going to turn it over to our fabulous senior warden, Arthur Perkins.
Thank you, David. So my rector's report is in the annual report, and I believe it's on page 16. And then I wanted to remind you all that as we did last year, the various ministry reports for the various ministries will be contained in the mid-year report, and they're not in this one. So while 2021 was a challenging year, we have much to be thankful for. We're back in our sanctuary for worship, and I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel to return to normal or a new normal, which we'll be very thankful for. I also wanted to mention that I'm particularly thankful for the leadership and dedication of the 2021 vestry, and for the staff and volunteers. Secretary Clerk Phil Albert, and
You don't want to hear my sermon again. Or if you do, it's online, hopefully. So as is my practice at these annual gatherings, I want to first look back to years before to again remind us that while we have intense, certainly challenges, struggles, and opportunities today, so have people before us. And it is always helpful to sort of think about not just how the church in general, but St. Mary's in particular, what were their challenges and opportunities in their time and space. So I'm a little off in my 25 and 50, but bear with me, because it worked. We're looking today at the 1990 annual report. And some of the highlights from that year were that was the centennial year. It was the year that St. Mary celebrated 100 years officially, although it was a community before that. There was a special service at Grace Cathedral to celebrate and honor that service, or that year. Some of the ministries that were celebrated in the annual report were the young adults group, house groups, the Sunday brunch bunch, that sounds like fun, and then just the abundant participation in Sunday school and all the choirs. That year was the second ever parish retreat at Bishop's Ranch, which totaled 60 people, which I actually appreciated hearing that, because oftentimes we hear, oh, the good old days when 6,000 people from St. Mary's were involved in this or that. You know, we had 50-some people in the last several Bishop's Ranches retreats, so that's just good to hear. There were 51 baptisms that year and 21 marriages, and so it's a different phase of life this year, but, celebrating the abundant life back then. Here is a big one. That was the year that Manny Gabiana became our custodian, taking over for his father-in-law at that point. So we're in participation with the food bank. Some vestry members back then, I love it that I know these names, was Alexandra Grover, Alan Jurgensen, Tim Smith, who, crazy wherever he is, he's there somewhere, there you go. Rod Douglas, Georgine's husband Hayes Keeler, Adele Zackerson, Pam Bledsoe, Mike Lucy, and Kathleen Murray. Woohoo, thank you, thank you. The notes talked about how there was a very concerning, quote-unquote, budget scare in the summer of 1990. They were worried about making their end-year goal, but at the end of the year, they had a $1,000 surplus. However, the budget projected for the next year, 1991, was at a $20,000 deficit, or about 3.5% of the budget. So, ebbing and flowing here, as St. Mary's does. Perhaps my favorite part of the whole report was there were 4 songs to be sung. I'm not sure in what order, maybe at the end, but is the was just getting to know you. Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. Do you want to hit the organ there? Never mind, I'm kidding. So, a little St. Mary's humor there. And so that was 1990. Now, you'll forgive me, I think, eventually, but 50 years ago was a year that I'd already brought to you at some point. So I decided to do something different. I went back to the oldest record we have in terms of annual at St. Mary's. Years and really helped stabilize St. Mary's. So let me give you a little bit of a background. St. Mary's was started in 1890 officially. In the first, 1918. So in the first 28 years, which in the history book tells us were the good years of the first season, there were 10 rectors. And then in 1918, when the rector, who probably died from the Spanish flu, the book says that then the lean years of St. Mary's came. And for the next 30 years, there were 7 rectors, but actually what those were for the most part people who, the St. Mary's went to mission status. We lost our role as a parish. And at one point, the longest standing rector at that time was really just a priest who showed up on Sundays to do the service and then had a day job. There was nothing else but Sunday mornings. And so Keppel Hill arrives at St. Mary's in 1948. Betty, I don't know how they did this, but they had the annual meeting on January 12th. How did they get the finances ready? And I love it because we have this hard copy of historical record of all the numbers. So, I am really glad we don't have that kind of timeline underneath us. So let me get this back in the folder. I'll just put it here. So 1948. A year where St. Mary's, as its new rector, is still in mission status. There is a report on a Young People's Fellowship. And what it articulates is this is actually a senior high youth group that had about a total of 35 members total, but 25 actively participating weekly. Now, this is actually a huge deal because what you and I understand is youth ministry in the Episcopal Church, actually in mainline denominational churches, didn't start really until the 70s. So this expression of a focused gathering on young people in the late 40s is impressive. We go on to have reports about the evening and afternoon auxiliary groups, which I find fascinating. Auxiliary groups were members of women who got together to discuss book studies and such, And the reason why there was an evening one is because the evening women, it was only started 2 years before, were working women, professional women, who could not participate in the daytime one with the women who did not work. And so they had two very different groups with different boards, different budgets, and different ways of giving to certain ministries, like the Altar Guild and such. Just a fascinating construct that is not present today. Church schools even though it was a mission, there was church school participation, both with children and adults. And in fact, a CDSP professor was engaged to teach adult formation. Nobody was here to tell me about this. I don't have any familiar vestry members' names from this year. But there was a lot of reporting about the parish house, both in its use, its renovation, and its debt maintenance. And I'm guessing they're talking about that building back there. The rhythms of love and grace here at St. Mary's. So, lest you all think I'm too evangelical, let me read to you Kendall Keppel Hill's words of hope. He said he was hoping for greater evangelistic opportunity on the part of members of the congregation to win souls for Christ, children for church school, candidates for baptism and confirmation. Don't hear that much in the Episcopal Church anymore. And so that was 48. And so and it really was a turning point of St. Mary's to really gain some stability, because ultimately it was Keppel Hill who grows the church back, and even expectation or projection, and ebb and flow with the world circumstances around us. I invite you to read my written report in this, but we did have to just pivot in so many ways out of necessity that led us to real gems. And in particular, the fact that we used that outside courtyard as a beautiful worship space, honestly, throughout the pandemic, when it was allowed at any level, and then in its sort of the full fruition, if you will, of those Eucharistic services for the family service at 9 a.m. and the Easter services last year. I'm just like, we would have never discovered those moments without all of the stress and chaos that has happened. And while I don't want that to happen anymore, proud and grateful to be a part of a community that took that journey. Along with that great flexibility, I want to give abundant and incredible thanks for the partnership of Mike Stafford as our interim associate minister. It's a gamble to hire a layperson in what is traditionally a clergy role, and what I like to show is that sometimes clergy can be useful. And I will, this is a, I missed something. No, I didn't, okay. Looking ahead, the potential for what we have to respond in COVID is hopefully lessening. What was a pandemic will probably be endemic, both with the disease itself, and I think with the circumstances of life in front of us. I don't know if you've heard some phrases, but what's happening right now in terms of church participation, engagement, virtually, when are we going to go back to way it was? I think we're all in a world in many aspects of our lives of that what is to be has yet to reveal itself, and it will be different. And so that is the same with our community as a church. And so I delight in that. And I also acknowledge the anxiety of that some of the things that we just thought would be are not, and some of the things that we have yet to think of have yet to appear. And so we are still shifting. So while this is the first year since my time here, we've had a deficit, a budget deficit, it's less than 1%. And given the fact that there are many churches that would probably have closed in the next 10 years, will be closing in the next 2, I'm very grateful that we are where we are. And I want to hold on to the greater vision of the world is changing. And so how do we not only be faithful to who we were as an Episcopal Church, but be faithful to who God is calling us to be as an Episcopal Church? And so a part of that, I'm really delighted in this process of hiring a new associate priest, and I'm so grateful for every person who's partnering with me in that, including the vestry. And I look forward to sharing with you those details and that process. We are now taking applications, and the process will hopefully fulfill itself in late spring, with this person being here, if not sooner than that, certainly by the time the program year starts in the fall. And so I'm excited to faithfully discern and walk with you all into the Holy Spirit's guiding of us as she leads and invites us into God's preferred and promised future. And so just some simple gratitude. I want to thank all of you who are here now doing the business of the church. And I want to thank all the volunteers and parishioners who come and make this what is possible. Because as I said before, this is a group effort. And what we do together. And all of us have a calling for God's grace in our common life, not just in our lives at home, but at St. Mary's life as well. So thank you for those who volunteer, again, for Betty and Ellen, and every volunteer who really takes a ministry and owns it and makes it possible. Those in the Altar Guild, the Flower Guild, the Sunday school teachers, those who are involved in our justice and outreach ministries, all of these things. I want to thank the staff who have been so flexible and willing to give so much effort given all the crazy circumstances in the last year. I want to thank our deacons, Tim, who's here, and Nancy, who's here with us in spirit, who is at home because her dog ate her glasses. Sorry, Nancy, that's why she is not here right now. But we are so blessed to have not just deacons in our midst, but deacons who know and love this community so well and for so long. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nancy. And while we've thanked Cynthia, Will, and Arthur previously, let me just back up and say I want to thank all the vestry, because the talk was when we recruited last year's class was, hey, we're on Zoom till the summer, but don't you worry, we'll be back at it like normal come the summer. And we've been on screens for most of the year, except for one in-person gathering. So the vestry who is here, who's committed, who's dealt with so many challenges, thank you. And in particular, let me thank Arthur, who again has met with me weekly to discover, to explore, to discern, to pray about the mess we've been in, and will be to some degree. But again, like you said to me, I will say to you, I needed you. You were there, and to do this together was a great blessing in my life and the life of St. Mary's. So let's give him and all of them a big round of applause. And finally, I just want to reiterate again, and he's not here because he doesn't like the spotlight, but this next 6 months will be all about becoming aware and dealing with the truth and just appreciating the heck out of our dear beloved Manny. Yes. Who knows how we will fulfill that position going on? I already asked Manny if I could hire his son. He said he's not interested. But if you remember, Manny's position was his father-in-law's before, so we are in a different era change. And so again, if you read my letter earlier this week, Arthur is going to create a small task force for us to discern what is next. But I just want to hold up this moment officially to thank him. And again, we'll say, I have not told the vestry yet, but a special task force will be designated to figure out how the heck we're going to celebrate Manny come June. So thank you. And with that, the only last thing I have to share is I'm excited that this upcoming year, with a new vestry class and a new vestry opportunity for discernment, discovery, and fun, is that I have extended and has been accepted that Gloria Galindo will be our new senior warden. So Gloria, let me introduce you. And vestry, immediately after this meeting, we're heading up to the library. Get there as fast as you can so we can do it quickly. We will be electing the junior warden, which is the senior warden is picked and announced by the rector. The junior warden is elected by the vestry, who you elected to be on the vestry. And so while it's not official yet, the only person we have running for junior warden is our very own Nancy Clothier. There she goes. So unless there's a hostile coup, my guess is that get your money on it right now that Nancy Clothier will be the junior warden. It's my hope. All right, with that, I've lost my agenda. I think I just have to pray. So would you stand up with me, and we'll close in prayer. And I thank you all again for being present, not just to here today in this moment, to St. Mary's as a whole. We are, again, abundantly blessed, even given the circumstances, with a critical mass of resources, of people, of all ages, of talents, and so many of the things that God is going to invite us to live into in the future, we have. And for that, I'm really grateful. So with that, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy God, again, we give you abundant thanks for your call and your flow in our lives, individually, but in particular in this moment, communally, as this place of grace known as St. Mary's. Thank you for the year past and the opportunity to lean into your presence and your spirit and your power in discerning all that was called from us. Thank you for the year ahead to continue to rely upon your love and grace in the gifts of this unique vestry, in the gift of these your unique people known as the Parish of St. Mary's. Bless us and continue to help us be a blessing to others as we gather together in your name on Sundays and in the days in between, so that your love may be known into this city and into the world through St. Mary's. We pray this in the mystery of God, the love of the Son, and the flow of the Spirit. Amen. Amen. Thank you all. Getting to know you. Oh, I like this. Okay. With that, thank you all. The meeting is adjourned, right? Vestry, please head up to the library.